I never imagined that the same hands I once held to help him cross the street would one day sign papers to erase me. My name is Eleanor Mitchell. I am 72 years old. I was a wife for 47 years, a mother for 49, and a homeowner for 37. That house on Maple Street wasn't just wood and brick. It was my life pressed into walls. It was the smell of cinnamon every Christmas morning. It was pencil marks on the kitchen doorway tracking Michael's height as he grew taller than me at 16. It was George's laughter echoing down the hallway when he'd chase our son after dinner. And it was mine. 5 years after George died, the house became quieter, yes. But it was never empty. The roses he planted still bloomed every spring. I still talked to him while watering them. I still set 2 cups out sometimes before remembering. I was not frail. I was not confused. I was not helpless. But apparently, I was inconvenient. It started slowly. Michael began visiting more often. At first, I thought it was love. Grief makes you cling to what remains, and I believed my son was simply afraid of losing me too. "Mom, those stairs look steep," he'd say casually. "They've looked steep for 37 years, I'd reply. "Maybe you should think about somewhere safer." Safer. That word crept into every conversation like mold spreading behind wallpaper. Jennifer, his wife, smiled too much when she looked around my living room. Her eyes measured things, assessed. Calculated. "This neighborhood has gone up in value," she once said while pretending to admire my curtains. "You're sitting on a gold mine." I laughed at the time. I wasn't laughing 3 months later. That Tuesday morning, they arrived with a man in a gray suit and a leather briefcase. I remember the way the morning light hit the kitchen table. I remember how George's empty chair seemed to stare at me. "Mom, this is Mr. Peterson. He helps families plan transitions." "Transitions?" I asked. "To assisted living," Jennifer said quickly. "Sunnyvale is beautiful. You'll love it." "I'm not moving." Michael sighed. I was a stubborn child refusing vegetables. "You can't live alone forever." "I can live alone today." Papers appeared on the table like magic tricks. So many papers. So many words, legal phrases that swam in front of my eyes. I asked questions, but the answers came too fast. "It's just formalities. It's temporary. It's for your protection." I should have stood up. I should have thrown them out. But he looked at me the way he used to when he needed me to trust him. And somewhere deep inside, I still believed the boy who once cried when his goldfish died would never harm me. He put the pen in my hand. "Trust me, Mom." And I did. When they left, they were smiling. Jennifer hugged him in the driveway like they'd just won something. 3 days later, I found out they had $750,000. That's what my house was worth. That's what my life was worth. By Thursday, my belongings were being sorted into piles. Keep, donate, estate sale? Jennifer moved through my home like a manager closing down a store. "You won't need this at Sunnyvale." My wedding china went into a box. George's tools went into another. My photo albums were stacked carelessly, as if memories were recyclable. Friday morning I went to the bank. $43,000. Gone. Transferred into a joint account with Michael's name on it. "For your care," the bank manager said carefully. "For my care." That night I didn't cry. I burned. He wasn't worried about my safety. He was liquidating me. When I called the lawyer, my voice barely trembled. Something inside me had hardened. Something old and steady and unbreakable. By Monday morning, the restraining order was filed. By Monday afternoon, Michael was screaming on my porch. "You embarrassed me. You stole from me. It was for you." "Then why was it in your name?" Jennifer's mask slipped first. "You ungrateful old woman." And that was the moment something in me finally snapped free. They didn't see me as a mother. They saw an asset. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and tension. Jennifer cried beautifully on the stand. She spoke of forgotten stoves and missed dinners, of concern, of sacrifice. Michael talked about promises to my late husband, about duty. Then the lawyer pulled his internet search history. Luxury resorts in Italy. Beachfront property in the Bahamas. 3 weeks before moving me to a nursing home. Silence filled the courtroom like a held breath. And when Michael said, "If I used some of it for myself, that was my right," I watched the judge's eyes change. That was the moment he lost. When the judge declared me competent, restored my home, revoked his power, and ordered my money returned, I didn't feel triumph. I felt air rush back into my lungs. He didn't look at me as he left the courtroom. He looked at the floor. 2 weeks later, he was arrested for elder financial abuse. I did not attend. I watered my roses instead. People asked if I felt guilty. I did not. He had packed my life into boxes while planning vacations. He had called me incompetent to steal my home. He had grabbed my arm and threatened to bury me in legal fees. He had chosen money over his mother. All I had chosen was survival. Months passed. The house stayed. The roses bloomed. My friends filled my kitchen with laughter again. And I realized something I never understood before. I had not lost a son in that courtroom. I had lost an illusion. The boy I raised was gone long before the trial. All that remained was a man who believed my age made me weak. He was wrong. I am 73 now. I climb my own stairs. I cook in my own kitchen. I sleep in the bedroom my husband painted for me in 1987. And every morning when sunlight spills through those windows, I whisper the same words. You did not erase me. You did not win. The first night after the arrest, I expected to feel something dramatic: relief, vindication, grief. Instead, I felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that settles in your bones after you've carried something heavy for too long. I had been carrying fear. Carrying betrayal. Carrying the terrible realization that the child I once rocked through fevers could look at me and see opportunity instead of mother. I made tea that night and sat at my kitchen table alone. The same table where he had spread those papers. The same table where I had signed away everything. I ran my fingers across the wood grain and remembered sanding it with your garage before we brought it inside. We were young and poor and stubbornly proud of anything we built ourselves. We'll grow old here, George had said. I smiled through tears I hadn't allowed myself before. We had grown old here. Just not the way we imagined. The town moved faster than I expected. News travels differently in small places. It doesn't knock politely. It seeps through grocery aisles and church pews and hair salon chairs. Some people avoided my eyes at first, unsure what to say. Others squeezed my hand and whispered, "You were brave." I didn't feel brave. I felt like a woman who refused to disappear. Michael's employer released a statement about maintaining ethical standards. His photo vanished from the company website within hours. Jennifer deactivated her social media accounts after strangers began commenting under old vacation photos. One afternoon, as I was buying tomatoes, a woman I barely knew approached me. "I wish my mother had fought," she said quietly. "My brother moved her into assisted living and sold her condo. She never recovered." Her voice trembled. "Don't let anyone tell you you did something wrong," she added. I realized then that this wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. It was about every older woman who had been told she was confused. Every widow who had been rushed into signatures. Every parent whose child believed entitlement was inheritance. Michael wrote me a letter 3 weeks after the arraignment. The envelope looked ordinary. His handwriting did not. I sat by the fireplace to read it. He didn't apologize. Not really. He explained. He said he had financial pressures I didn't understand. He said the market had been unpredictable. He said Jennifer had pushed him. He said he thought I'd adjust eventually. He said he never meant for things to go this far. There was one sentence that made my hands shake. "You could have just trusted me." I folded the letter carefully. Trust. He used that word again. The same word he used when he put the pen in my hand. I watched the paper curl into flame. The fire did not hesitate. Neither did I. The criminal case dragged on for months. Depositions, statements, financial audits. I learned more about my son's debts than I ever wanted to know. Credit cards near their limits. A second mortgage on their home. Risky investments that hadn't paid off. I wasn't his retirement plan. I was his bailout. When the plea deal came, Linda explained it gently. Probation, restitution, permanent record. He won't go to prison. I nodded. I didn't want him in prison. I wanted him to understand. I don't know if he ever did. The day the plea was finalized, I stood in my garden instead of in court. I pressed my hands into the soil and planted new rose bushes along the fence. Pink ones. George's favorite. There is something sacred about planting after devastation. It feels like defiance. Jennifer filed for divorce shortly after. Word spread that she blamed him entirely. That she claimed she had been misled. That she had no idea about the vacation searches. I remembered her tears in my living room. They had been well rehearsed. One afternoon, months later, I saw Michael from a distance. I was leaving the pharmacy. He was collecting carts in a parking lot across the street, wearing a store uniform that hung loosely on him. He looked older, softer around the middle, harder around the eyes. For a moment, our gazes met. There was no wave. No nod, just recognition. He looked away first. I drove home slowly that day, not because I felt sorry for him, but because I felt the final thread snap. There was nothing left to salvage. Grief came later, not for the man he had become, but for the child he had been. I remembered his first day of kindergarten. How he clung to my skirt and cried because he was afraid I wouldn't come back. I'll always come back. I had promised. I kept that promise. He did not. Time did something unexpected. It softened me. Not toward him, toward myself. I stopped replaying the warning signs I'd ignored. I stopped asking how I could have raised someone capable of such coldness. I stopped blaming my grief, my trust, my love. People change. Sometimes they rot. That rot is not the gardener's fault. A year after the trial, I hosted Thanksgiving in my house again. Margaret brought sweet potatoes. Rose brought pie. Patricia insisted on cooking the turkey, even though I told her I was perfectly capable. We filled the dining room with laughter. There were no empty chairs that night. Only chosen family. After dinner, Margaret raised her glass. To Eleanor, she said, eyes shining, for teaching us that independence doesn't expire. The room clinked in agreement. I felt warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with wine. I had not just saved my house. I had saved my voice. And that voice had grown louder. The local senior center asked me to speak at a seminar about financial protection for elders. I almost declined. Public speaking had never been my strength, but then I remembered how alone I had felt that Thursday night when the 7 and 50 Franzen haunted me. So I stood in front of 30 retirees and told them everything. The pressure, the signatures, the stolen savings, the courtroom. I watched their faces shift from shock to anger to determination. Afterward, 3 women approached me with questions about power of attorney. One man asked about freezing accounts. Another whispered that his daughter had been hinting about selling his farm. "You gave me courage," he said. "No one had ever said that to me before. Courage. I used to think courage was loud, dramatic, heroic. Now I know it is sometimes quiet. Sometimes it is simply saying no." Michael tried once more to reach me after his probation began. A voicemail from an unknown number. "Mom, I don't know how to fix this." I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. Some things are not meant to be fixed. They are meant to be learned from. My health remained strong. My mind remained sharp. The very traits they had tried to question in court became my armor. I joined a book club. I learned to use online banking securely. I met with Linda once a year to review my legal documents, this time with full understanding and clear boundaries. I updated my will. Not out of spite, out of clarity. My estate would go to charities that protect seniors and fund public libraries. Margaret would receive my grandmother's china. The house would be sold only after I was gone, and the proceeds would fund scholarships for nursing students. Michael was not mentioned. It wasn't punishment. It was consequence. 2 summers after the trial, I repainted the living room, a soft cream color that made the space feel lighter. I replaced the curtains Jern once admired with ones I chose myself. Choice. Such a simple word. Such a powerful thing. On my 74th birthday, I stood in my garden at sunrise. The roses were outrageous that year. Blooms spilling over the fence. Petals catching light like they were on fire. I thought about the version of me who had sat frozen at that kitchen table with a pen in her trembling hand. I wished I could reach back through time and whisper to her, "You are not done yet. You are not weak. You are not alone." If someone listening to my story is standing at their own kitchen table right now, papers spread out, family pressuring, fear creeping in. I want them to hear this. Pause. Ask questions. Get a lawyer who works only for you. Trust your instincts when something feels rushed. And never mistake love for control. I loved my son. I still do in a distant, complicated way that no longer demands proximity. But love does not require surrender. And motherhood does not require martyrdom. I wake each morning now without dread. I make my coffee, I open my windows, I water my roses, and I live, not quietly, not erased, not sold, but fully. If you had asked me years ago what strength looked like, I would have said endurance, sacrifice, putting your child first no matter what. Now I know strength sometimes looks like standing alone in a courtroom and saying, no more. It looks like revoking power. It looks like reclaiming your name. It looks like choosing yourself when no one else will. My son sent me to a nursing home so he could sell my house. He thought I would go quietly. Instead, I went to court. And in doing so, I didn't destroy his life. He did that himself. I simply refused to let him destroy mine. Winter came early that year. The house always felt different in winter. Quieter. The air heavier. George used to say cold weather made walls remember things. I never understood what he meant until I was alone in it. The trial was over. The money had been returned. The house was legally mine again, free and clear. Michael's name had been removed from every document he had tried to stain. But victory has a strange taste when it comes wrapped in your child's ruin. Some nights, I would sit in the living room with only the lamp on beside me, staring at the empty armchair across from mine. I didn't miss the man Michael had become. I missed the boy who once ran into this very room with scraped knees and tear-filled eyes. Mom, don't be mad. I was never mad when he was little. Never for long. I wonder when I had stopped recognizing him. The calls started in December. First from extended family. Couldn't you have handled it privately? He's your only son. Jail is extreme. They spoke as if I had sent him there personally. As if I had dialed the police out of spite. They ignored the fact that it was the state that pressed charges once the fraud was uncovered. That it was the evidence, the forged signatures, the bank transfers, the falsified medical assessment declaring me mentally unfit that built the case. Michael had sat in a doctor's office and told a stranger I was confused. That I wandered. That I forgot to eat. The doctor had signed the preliminary cognitive concern based solely on my son's report before ever meeting me. That document was what allowed him temporary authority over my finances. Authority he abused within 48 hours. When my lawyer discovered it, his voice changed in a way I will never forget. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Mrs. Mitchell. This was premeditated. Premeditated. That word hurt more than anything else. Because it meant he had planned it. He had sat at a table somewhere with Jennifer and decided I was an obstacle between them and something they wanted. I stopped answering family calls. Loneliness, I realized, is sometimes cleaner than betrayal. In January, I received a letter from him. The envelope was thin, the handwriting unmistakable. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Mom, I never meant for things to go this far. Jennifer pushed me into it. We were drowning in debt. The business wasn't doing well. I panicked. I thought selling the house was the only way out. You would have been safe at Sunnyvale. I wasn't trying to hurt you. You've made your point. I've lost everything. My job? My reputation. My marriage is falling apart. If you drop the civil suit, maybe I can rebuild something. Please, I read it twice. He never once said was sorry. Not truly. There was no I betrayed you. No, I was wrong. Only, I panicked. Only, Jennifer pushed me. Only, you made your point. As if this had been a lesson I'd chosen to teach. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer beside George's old watch. Then I made tea. The civil suit continued. The court ordered him to pay damages what he had already returned. Legal fees, emotional distress, fraud penalties. He declared bankruptcy 3 months later. Jennifer filed for divorce soon after. I did not celebrate. But I did not intervene. For the first time in my life, I allowed consequences to belong to someone else. Spring arrived again, and with the roses. I had considered selling the house after everything. Too many memories. Too much shadow in certain corners. But one morning, while pruning the bushes, my neighbor Clara leaned over the fence. "You look stronger," she said. "I am." "You staying?" "Yes." She smiled. "Good. This street needs women who don't fold." That afternoon, I made a decision. If Myville had seen me as an asset, then I would become one, but on my terms. I met with a financial advisor, a kind woman named Priya who listened more than she spoke. "I want to protect what's mine," I told her. "And I want to make sure no one can ever do that again." We created a trust. The house would never be directly owned by another family member. It would pass into a charitable housing foundation upon my death, specifically one that supported elderly women facing financial abuse. If Michael had hoped to inherit what he once tried to steal, that door quietly closed forever. Not out of revenge, out of principle. I also installed security cameras, changed locks, updated every password. Some people said it was paranoid. I called it peace of mind. In June, I saw him for the first time since the trial. By accident, I was leaving the grocery store when I noticed a familiar figure sitting in a car across the parking lot. He looked thinner, older, his hair grayer than it should have been. He didn't approach me. He just watched. For a moment, our eyes met. I searched his face for remorse. I saw resentment, and something else. Regret, but not for what he did to me, for what it cost him. I got into my car and drove home without waving. That night, I didn't cry. I slept deeply. Because closure doesn't always come from apologies. Sometimes it comes from understanding that the person you're waiting to change won't. Years passed. Yes, years. Life did not end with that courtroom. I joined a community book club, took watercolor classes, volunteered twice a week at a legal aid center, helping other seniors understand documents before they signed them. I would sit across from trembling hands and say gently, "Read everything, even if it's your own child." The first time I told my story publicly, my voice shook. By the 10th time it didn't. Women would come up to me afterward and whisper their fears. "My daughter wants access to my account. My nephew says I shouldn't live alone. My son says I'm forgetful." Sometimes they were right to be cautious. Sometimes their families truly cared. But I taught them one thing. Care does not require secrecy. Care does not require hidden transfers. Care does not begin with removing someone's independence without their consent. On my 75th birthday, I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where those papers had once been spread before me, and looked around. The walls were freshly painted. The table had been refinished. The air smelled of cinnamon again. Clara had brought cake. Priya had sent flowers. There was laughter. Real laughter that evening, when the house was quiet. I walked into the hallway where the pencil marks still tracked Michael's growth. I ran my fingers over the highest one. Age 16. He had been so proud the day he surpassed me. I closed my eyes and allowed myself one final grief. Not for the money. Not for the betrayal. For the simple truth that motherhood does not guarantee loyalty. Then I opened my eyes, and I let him go, completely. Not with anger. Not with vengeance. But with finality, because destroying his life was never the goal. Saving mine was. And I did. 1 year after I stopped waiting for an apology, he knocked on my door. It was late October. The wind was sharp, leaves scraping across the porch like restless thoughts. I had just finished making soup when the knock came. 3 firm raps. The same rhythm he used as a teenager when he forgot his keys. For a moment, I couldn't move. There is something about a mother's body. It recognizes her child before her mind does. I opened the door. Michael stood there without a coat. His eyes were tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep but from living wrong for too long. He looked smaller somehow. "Hi, Mom." He said it softly, almost like he was unsure he still had the right. I didn't invite him in immediately. "What do you want, Michael?" He swallowed. "Can we talk?" The air between us held 5 years of silence. "I have 10 minutes. He nodded quickly, stepping inside like a guest who didn't trust his welcome. He looked around the house as if expecting it to have changed beyond recognition. But it hadn't. The photos were still on the wall. The rug still lay beneath the coffee table. George's armchair still faced mine. "You kept everything the same?" he said. "Yes." He sat on the edge of the sofa. Not leaning back, not relaxing. I lost the appeal, he began. I know. I'm working construction now. That's honest work. He looked surprised by that. I'm not here about money. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He stared at his hands. The hands I once held steady when he learned to write his name. I was wrong. The words landed carefully, like fragile glass. I was selfish. I convinced myself it'd be fine anywhere. I told myself it was practical. I didn't want to see you as aging. There it was. The truth wrapped in discomfort. You didn't want to see me as human? I said quietly. You wanted to see me as temporary. His jaw tightened. I thought I deserved something. After Dad died. After helping you with repairs and paperwork. I told myself I was just taking what would be mine eventually. And when you had it. He didn't answer. Because he had never intended to stop. He looked up at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw something familiar. Not the entitlement. Not the arrogance. Fear. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I don't want you to die hating me. It was an honest sentence. And honesty, even late, carries weight. I don't hate you. I replied. His shoulders dropped slightly. But I don't trust you. That hurt him more. He blinked hard. I'm in therapy, he said quickly, as if offering proof. I'm trying to understand why I thought money was security. Why I panicked, why I justified it. And I don't like what I see. Silence settled between us again. Not hostile, just heavy. You can't undo what you did, I said. And I won't rewrite my will. The house is no longer yours. It never will be? He nodded slowly. I figured. I also won't rescue you from consequences. Not financially? Not legally? I'm not asking you to. Another pause. Then what are you asking for? He looked around the room again. At the walls that once held his childhood drawings. At the staircase he slid down despite my scolding. At the doorway marked with pencil lines. A chance, he said. Not to inherit anything. Just to show up, to help, to be around. If you'll allow it. It would have been easier if he had asked for money. That I could refuse cleanly. But this was complicated, because a mother's heart is not a courtroom. It does not operate on verdicts alone. Why now? I asked. He hesitated. When Jennifer left, she told me something. She said, you didn't just steal from your mother. You stole from yourself. I didn't understand it then. I do now. He looked at me, eyes wet but steady. I lost you long before the trial, and I kept digging. I studied him carefully. Time had carved lines into his face. Regret had softened the sharpness that once defined him. But regret is not redemption. Redemption is behavior over time. You can visit, I said finally. On Sundays for coffee we will talk slowly, carefully. His breath left him in a shaky exhale. No financial discussions. I continued. No paperwork, no advice about my living situation. Ever again? Understood. If I feel manipulated even once, the door closes permanently. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. It had been years since he called me that. He stood to leave but hesitated at the hallway. Can I? I knew what he was asking. I stepped aside. He walked to the pencil marks and placed his hand over the highest one. I thought I was taller than you, he said quietly. You were? He looked back at me. But you're stronger? For the first time in a long time, I allowed a small smile. Strength doesn't roar, endures. He left after 9 minutes. Not 10. The following Sunday, he returned with coffee. Not expensive, just simple. We talked about the weather, about work, about neutral things. It was awkward, but it was real. Weeks turned into months. He showed up consistently. Sometimes he fixed small things around the house, but only when I asked. Never assuming. Never taking control. He never mentioned money. Never asked about the trust. Never hinted at inheritance. And slowly, not completely, not blindly, something fragile began to rebuild. Not the old relationship. That one had burned down. But something new, something adult. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after his knock on my door, we were sitting in the garden when he spoke again. I don't deserve what you're giving me. I'm not giving you anything, I replied gently. I'm observing you. He laughed softly. That's fair. I looked at him then, truly looked at him, and understood something I hadn't before. Destroying his life had never been my intention. Holding him accountable had. And accountability had done what enabling never could. It forced him to confront himself. Some people break under consequences. Some rebuild. Michael was rebuilding. Not into the boy he once was, but into a man who understood that love is not ownership, that parents are not retirement plans, that aging does not equal weakness. On my 78th birthday, he brought a small framed photo. It was a picture of me in the garden, taken from the porch without me noticing. "You look peaceful," he said. "I am." I placed the photo on the mantel, not as a symbol of forgiveness, but as proof of survival. I do not know what the future holds. I am not naive enough to believe pain erases itself completely. Trust, once shattered, never returns to its original shape, but it can take a new one, stronger at the seams. I still own this house. I still climb my stairs. I still water my roses. And every Sunday, my son knocks on the door, not to take, not to calculate, but to sit, and that after everything is enough.